All right. So last time in this series on remote coaching and attracting clients and keeping yourself somewhat organized while writing programming for people, we talked about our personal stories, how we got involved in coaching, how we got started. And for each of us, we kind of got started at a time when remote coaching, online coaching wasn't quite as common or quite as prevalent as it is now, right? So I think we sort of said this in the last episode, but people listening now who are trying to get started with attracting clients or getting involved in remote coaching should probably take each of our stories with like a little bit of a grain of salt, because when we were first, being approached to write programs for people, there weren't multiple established companies with very clean processes and like nice websites offering the service, right? There weren't tons of people on Instagram trying to attract clients and sell templated programs. Like those things were out there, but it was much, 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 much less common than it is now, which kind of changes the game in terms of getting that handful of initial clients, which can sort of get you started, right? So, I think there are things that people can learn from hearing our stories and how we got into this line of work, so to speak. People who are new to remote coaching now, or maybe have like one or two clients and sort of want to, cross the threshold where they're actually doing a lot more programming for people, are in a totally different environment, right? That there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of options. The marketplace is, I wouldn't say fully saturated, but quite saturated. There's a lot of people with a lot of clout and prestige and influence who are offering services. So, like someone who's interested in hiring a coach, why on earth would they want to take a chance working with someone who only has one or two clients and isn't famous on Instagram and hasn't coached, 29 different games athletes? That's an actual question that you should be able to answer. If you're like, yes, I'd love to work online. I'd love to do remote coaching. I'd love to just crack open the laptop, tell people to do thrusters and pull-ups and like call it a day, that's an appealing lifestyle for people. But the reality is it's actually pretty hard to get people to want to be coached by you, in the current environment. So, even though each of us got started at a time when we didn't necessarily have the level of saturation in the marketplace to attract clients, we do have some opinions and some ideas which may be helpful for people who are trying to get started now, right? And so, with the caveat that we might be way off base here, since we each sort of got over the initial hump before it was quite as challenging. We're gonna be a little bit prescriptive in this episode. We're gonna say, hey, here's what we think you should do if you actually want to get clients. So, Luke, what should people do? What's the deal?
Well, I think some people are gonna think the first thing that they need to do is something involving a computer, but we're gonna say actually get on the gym floor and start to get yourself in front of people. I definitely think that's an important part of developing developing a sort of a base of clients. Short story, I think I got to a point nearly 4 years ago where I moved from the UK to Barcelona, and I moved with the goal of just doing remote coaching. And anyway, just sort of moving over, not necessarily working at an affiliate anymore, not having sort of in-person coaching as a daily thing going on anymore. And then also COVID happened maybe about 18 months into me, just over a year into me being here. What I found was having that disconnect from in-person clients and in-person coaching wasn't necessarily helping me with online, how many online clients I had. So I think it's really important to at least try to put yourself in a position where you can potentially get online clients with people you're currently working with, and you can potentially convert people. But then you've also got to take into consideration the type of place you're coaching at and the sort of environment that you are coaching in. I've been lucky enough to sort of coach into gyms which are a little bit more individual coaching, personal training centric rather than sort of like a group model. And that allowed me to convert clients over because I was helping them in classes. I was also helping them sort of on a one-to-one basis in the gym, but then I was giving them extra and additional support outside of that. And it allowed me to sort of develop some relationships and maintain some of my coaching clients over the years who have then also given me or brought in referrals and other people's clients as well. So I think if you can if you can get in front of people, it's very important because you can get your personality across. You can really actually help people in the moment, and that is very valuable. And I think if you can help people and provide value straight up and straight away, people will gravitate towards you as a coach. Whereas if you are purely going in from like an online angle, it may be weeks until you really, really provide sort of some value and some light bulb moments for your athletes. Second to that, you've also got to think about the trust and the trust that you can develop with people in person, and that's going to be the sort of in-person relationship that you're going to have. Like that is just everything from it, like the communication, the just sort of the being around them, just watching how, like, you know, them sort of seeing how you coach other people and how you may be delivering a level of professionalism, coaching other people, and how you may be consistent. You know, all of that type of stuff is really hard to see in an online remote coaching relationship. Whereas an in-person coaching relationship, you can get across those things. You don't necessarily even have to like think about getting across those things. Just being a good coach will like allow you to do that. And if you build up that trust, that's something that can just take a very, very long time to do online. And then if you think of the trust that those people will then impart onto potential referrals as well, that's very important. I think it's interesting. Some people I've actually gained as clients over the years. Like I've had people who I'm sort of, you know, I know someone who they may have worked out with in the gym, maybe someone that was following like a group program that I was posting before a few years ago, something like that. And then I've, through sort of a connection, ended up getting a remote client who would have never been able to contact me otherwise if there wasn't that connection there. And for that person to go online and sort of find, you know, one of these remote coaching companies, it's very easy for them to do that. But for them to just sort of have someone who they know and who they trust to be like, hey, you should seek out this person, they will be able to help you. I think that's really quite undervalued. And I think a lot of the time people can mess around on social media sort of chasing, you know, new leads and all this type of stuff, when really, like, you know, the sort of the typical saying, right, is like the best people in front of you, or the people in front of you are your best marketers. So I think that's really important, and it all sort of stems from that in-person coaching in sort of whatever capacity it might be.
I think, Luke, what you were saying there about, you know, being on the gym floor and talking to people, you know, that's kind of where I first started in terms of when I was doing just personal training. You know, at a Globo gym before I got into CrossFit, my kind of strategy around getting new clients for personal training was, you know, being on the gym floor and helping people out and talking to people and building relationships and building trust and giving people value, so that when they needed that help, I'd be the person they'd come to. And essentially, you know, that was 15 odd years ago, but that's all just the same thing can apply to now online. So building that trust, building relationships with people in an online capacity. You know, your audience on Instagram, on Facebook to an extent, you know, being able to give people value is still a great way to kind of get those relationships, so that when they need help, when they're looking for a coach, you're kind of the first person that comes to mind, and you're the first person that they reach out to, because you've developed that trust over time. And I think, you know, being in the gym with people is great, but if you're looking to do solely remotely, then you have to have equivalent of an online gym presence, where you have a group of people that see your content and that you're able to deliver value to, and that you will be the person that they come to when they need it.
Yeah, I think that the idea of trust that you're both getting at is really, really important here, right? That people are going to seek out a coach who they trust And if we think about the broader marketplace, which I was talking about earlier, people will substitute prestige for trust, right? That they trust prestigious people because they have a reputation or they've worked with like prominent athletes or whatever, right? So when people are thinking about like, all right, I want a program to follow, I want someone to tell me what to do, the thing that they're looking for, right, is someone who they either trust because they know them or they trust because they're famous, essentially. And so for coaches who are looking to attract clients, the challenge becomes, all right, how do I get people to trust me and trust that I know what I'm doing and trust that I can actually help them and trust that I'll like follow through, which is actually something we should sort of put a pin in that and talk about that too, just in terms of the some of the pretty bad behaviors we've seen from some remote coaching companies and some somewhat prominent remote coaches, right, in terms of what they actually deliver as a product. Let's come back to that. But yeah, right. I mean, the challenge is, how do you actually get people to trust you? And so, Luke, I think that you brought up a lot of really good points there, which is if you are coaching people in person, then the fact that you are able to like literally help them is a huge part of it, right? That, you see someone working on, let's say, their handstand walking, right, or their snatch or whatever, and you're like, hey, listen, like, do you want a little tip on this? Like, maybe try it this way instead, right? Or like, hey, let me see what you're actually doing for your program. Okay, cool. Like, you're doing this EMOM. I think the point of it is XYZ. Try it that way, see how it goes. And just like little things like that, without even the intention of like, oh, like here's my plan to get you as a client. Like, let me give you like helpful tips, right? Like, it's not even weird like that. It's just like, hey, listen, here's a few things that I'm seeing, try it out. And if that's successful for that individual, they feel like it's helpful, then, if they do want someone to give them more feedback or program for them or whatever, then they know that they're going to be able to potentially get that from you, right? Rather than following some templated program or working with a coach who doesn't actually like give them any training notes or anything like that, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I can actually get the feedback that I'm looking for. And the best way to demonstrate your capacity to do that is to like literally do that with people who you see with some frequency, and then John, to your point, right? I mean, it's challenging to get in front of people who you are not going to see in person. And then the difficulty becomes like, okay, you're just like another person putting out content in a sea of content with somewhat misaligned incentives for offering actually valuable stuff, right? That the things that do well are not necessarily the things that are actually like good or useful. So figuring out like, all right, if I do want to start playing this content game and I have some people who are paying attention, is there something that I can do that is actually helpful for me in terms of like attracting clients who are the right kinds of clients, who are people who probably already know me unless I'm like famous on Instagram already? Like, I'm not going to necessarily like, oh, let me make this reel of like some complicated coaching tip and like get 15,000 followers. Like, it's not going to happen. So, the content game for getting actual good clients is not the same thing as the content game for I want to be like flashy and obnoxious and attract attention, right? So that's like a pretty tricky little situation as well.
Yeah, I think the social media is an interesting one because you have like a lot of I think because I've started to look into it a lot more. I don't coach at an affiliate or a gym, so I don't really have that like I don't really see people on a regular basis that I can help in that capacity. Sorry, a little bit of wind. So shush. So
that's wind? How is that wind?
So the wind is so the wind is moving a window. It
sounds like a woodpecker. I think it's a woodpecker, not wind.
It could be my pet woodpecker. No, the wind is moving a window, and then the window has a shutter on it, and the shutter is a bit rusty and creaky. Anyway,
is the window being open the reason that your Wi-Fi is good this week?
Maybe something like that. I'm stealing it from my neighbors. They haven't figured out how to put a password on it. So anyway, getting back to the sort of social media game, I think a lot of people sort of have you hear about this type of stuff like you got to be consistent, you got to follow 50 people a day and then unfollow them, and you got to be, doing hashtags which are sort of, are popular. You've got to be doing changing up your bio to do all this. And it's all stuff I've sort of looked at, played around with. Some of it I've not really done because I'm just like, this is way too much effort. And I do think that you get to a point within this where sometimes, like if you think about as a coach, it's easy for you to sit down, write a program, do all that type of stuff. But then like being able to sort of portray yourself online can be really quite difficult. And a lot of that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So if you're, going to make a commitment to post every single day, it will not be long until you sort of run out of stuff to say, or just you start to get like, I don't know, imposter syndrome, and you're like, okay, is this the thing I should be saying? And I think within that, it can be quite difficult for coaches. But I think some of the things that you can try to do, which if you think of like what we were saying before with the in-person coaching, but if you go on social media, is like try to show your face, try to speak, try to show like whether you're coaching other people, try to show how you're coaching other people, whether that's going to be, you need to try to provide some element of social proof. So I think that's important that you try to get that across, not necessarily that your grid looks a certain way and that you're playing all of this different sort of social media tactic type stuff. And also being careful of like, if you do engage with people who are social media coaches or whatever, like a lot of the stuff they put out there is to get you to buy their products and all of this type of stuff. So, sometimes it can seem a bit like a bit of a disingenuous game. But I think there's trying to get your sort of personality across is going to be important to a certain degree. And then also just, if you get contacted by someone through social media and that's your first point of contact with them, you've got to be on top of it and you've got to communicate with them pretty quickly, or you've got to do it consistently. So if you are going to be a bit slow with your responses, try to be consistently slow with them, or just be consistent, right? It's not necessarily about, like responding to people within 30 minutes or something like that, but it is about, showing them from the get-go what they're going to experience from hiring you as a coach, as opposed to, like maybe getting in contact with them. And then, I think sometimes it can be challenging as well. Cause I think, I mean, I've tried to, funnel clients through a certain way. And I've just realized over time is like, people just go on Instagram and they will just message you on Instagram, and clients will send your potential. I mean, it depends on how much you engage with it, right? I mean, I engage with it. So my clients will send my Instagram to their friends, and their friends will go on and they will message through there. Whereas I would much prefer an email, but that's not going to happen. So it's like, this is the sort of the way you've got to sort of approach it, is just making sure that you're consistent, and just understanding what like the real beneficial activities are. Is it the fact that you post every single day, or is it the fact that your grid looks a certain way, or you make a funny reel or whatever, and now you're going on TikTok and you're trying to get all these, you got to think of like the people that you're attracting as clients from. If you do put together some funny posts or whatever that do give you a ton of followers, like how many of those people are actually going to pay for a coaching service? They may pay for like something that's 10 euros, pounds, or dollars, but how many of them are going to commit to coaching with you for a period of time, which for you as a coach allows you to create like a living and a craft off of.
Yeah, Luke, I think that's a really important distinction between people using your social media as a way to communicate with you, or like people who you're currently working with referring you and utilizing your social media page as like a tool to do that, compared with the sort of like, I have a massive audience and I'm famous and I'm going to convert like some small percentage of those people into a paid product, right? So those are like completely different things. And I think that a lot of people who are trying to get involved in remote coaching or whatever are thinking about things through the latter way, right? Like, okay, if I have whatever 100,000 followers and 0.1% of them will buy something that I'm offering, then that results in like X amount of money. So what I need to do is try to get to that 100,000 follower mark, because then I'll be able to, like monetize that audience, which like, sure, that's true at some level. But the reality is that's like a different game, and that's unrealistic for a lot of people. But what is realistic is what Luke is talking about, which is, hey, I'm working with some people right now. It's going well. They have friends who are also interested in remote coaching. They actually literally share like my coaching page with those friends and say like, hey, listen, like I know that you were talking about getting a coach. Here's my coach. Reach out to him and see if he's interested. I know he said he would be able to potentially take on some more clients. You have some useful things on that page. So it's kind of like a different situation when someone is like already interested in checking out your social media page to sort of like verify that you are who you say you are, right? Or to sort of like check out a referral, compared with like trying to grow a large audience and build from there. And that having some clarity, if you are going to play the social media game, about like what your actual goals are with it, especially if you don't necessarily love social media. I know a lot of coaches complain about it. We're like, I don't want to be on the content treadmill. Like, I feel like I just create all this stuff and I don't get a ton of engagement. And if you are trying to like build a massive audience, it's like, yeah, maybe this isn't actually the right strategy or like the right thing for you as a coach. But if you are in a situation where people are using your social media page to refer you or just like check out what you do, then you can sort of think about that differently, right? It's like, okay, this is sort of like a website that just tells what I do, rather than this game that I'm playing to try to grow the audience as a whole, if that makes sense.
I think one thing I was going to add as well, like you were saying, you have to sort of establish those goals, because like you're always going to end up getting to a space where something will become a grind, and you want if people get into coaching because they like programming, they like coaching, they want to help people, it allows them to be, so there's a bit of like an intellectual side, problem solving side to coaching that they enjoy. And then you sort of veer off into this online world and you're like, okay, this is it. I'm going for it. That might not allow you to do the things that you want to do. And, you like the grind might be that you have to stay up a little bit later and write some programs. That's okay. That's, can be quite an enjoyable process. But if you end up sort of trying to play this numbers game, it's like that will lead you into spending a lot of time on your phone and potentially just doing stuff that you don't necessarily want to do. I know personally like a couple of people who have a semi-decent following, and they have, products that are like under $50, that they have people sort of, engaging with, whether that's like workshops or video courses or whatever it is. But they are on their phone constantly, and they are constantly putting stuff out. And that for them, it's a full-time job for them, is all of that phone stuff and social media and all of that. Whereas like, I think I heard maybe Greg Everett one time, and he was sort of saying that like sometimes in coaching you can get down to like you get to a point where, okay, you do go down, just continue being a coaching, putting out sort of, coaching content and trying to do that, or do you just sort of become a marketer and play that game where you're just trying to, get numbers through the door and that type of thing, and then maybe not necessarily engaging with those clients on the level that you actually initially intended to when you first started off.
I think there's also a balance there in terms of putting out content for like being useful and being a person that's trying to help people get better, as well as just putting out content where you're trying to gain clients. Like those two aren't necessarily the same thing. You'll see some people who are putting out content and you're like, well, they're a very successful coach. They've got a lot of clients. Are they trying to really build up a big client base for their one-on-one stuff? Maybe not. Maybe they're just trying to put out useful content. Maybe they're trying to develop products which are more towards that templated variety and build up a reputation. But when you're putting content out, it's not necessarily just with the sole goal of trying to get new clients. There's a lot more around the reputation of you as a coach. And a lot of people do like to put out content just because they think it's useful to people, and they like to see people improve, and if they improve from something you give them, then great. But I think it's dangerous to put out content just from I'm trying to get new clients with this. And I think that's not necessarily the best way to grow from a, client-based business standpoint.
Yeah, to sort of like close the loop on a lot of the social media stuff, I think that it's important to think about, and it's important to be clear with what you're trying to accomplish with it, since there's a lot of I don't know what the right word is. Let's just say misaligned expectations about how social media works, especially for people who are, below the like 15 to 50,000 follower mark. So for coaches who are interested in getting like a few more clients, being clear what game you're playing if you decide to engage with social media, I think is important. And then to kind of circle back to what we were saying originally, the best way to get a few more clients is probably not to focus on growing your Instagram following or putting out content. The best way to get a few more clients is to work with people in person, to potentially coach classes at a local gym and take a few minutes after class and like give legitimately helpful feedback to people. It's to have a handful of personal training clients who you work with one-on-one who may be interested in transitioning away from having to schedule every single one of their sessions and are like, you know what, like, can we actually just do some sort of program and then maybe we check in like once a month or so? And you're like, actually, yes, we can. Like I offer this individualized coaching service, which is basically that, right? That's how James Fitzgerald from OPEX like got started with quote unquote program design, right? Is that like he taught his personal training clients how to do all the movements and then got them to the point where he was able to just like give them the exercises to do without them having to like spend 60 minutes with him, like counting reps for them essentially, right? Like that's like a really solid win-win for clients and for the coach. So I think that getting over the hump of like getting legitimately started with remote coaching is going to go much better for people focusing on in-person engagement, in-person interaction, converting personal training clients to program design clients, just being like legitimately helpful for people who you potentially see in person. And then I think the step beyond that is, sort of what you Luke, you and John are talking about with like have helpful stuff available to the right kind of person on a social media page, but think of that more so as like a resume or a website that someone could check out if they're interested, rather than necessarily trying to like legitimately grow a following, which again, like that's a totally separate situation. So I guess like the other thing that would be useful to discuss, which we talked about last time, is this idea of the person who's like one or two removed from you who knows your clients, right? Because I think that that's the other big spot that a lot of us actually get coaching clients from, right? Is referrals from clients or people who see our clients training and then, are like, oh, what are you doing? What program is that? Can I jump in on this workout with you? So yeah, I guess I'm just curious, what, if anything, do you guys do to facilitate that process?
I mean, I've never I think if you go in with the intention of like, oh, I'm gonna take this person as my client or something like that, don't think it's gonna sort of end that well. The best thing you can do, and we were talking about this at the beginning, is just like help them. Just try to like maybe inadvertently like help them through the process. So that could be like speaking to your client. If you know that they have someone who is training with them on a certain day, speak to your client and say, hey, do you want me to put together like a team workout for you guys or something like that? Something very, very small, but maybe you're sort of doing something for them, but you're not sort of like going out your way to do it like too much. I mean, it depends on obviously the situation, but like I encourage my athletes to train with other people. I say to them like, hey, go and do it, because that is like networking essentially. Like that's you going out there. They may be doing your program. Like I've had maybe like one or two people come up to me in the past who have had like just like weightlifting, personal training, working on their technique, and they've been like, yeah, my remote coach doesn't know I'm doing this, and I'm not allowed to do stuff with like other coaches or other people. And I'm like, that's just freaking sad. Like there's there's just like you know, you don't say it, but you're just like, yeah, your coach sounds like a dickhead. But it's just like you're just like, okay, cool, all right, and then you just carry on helping them. And yeah, like I mean, that is just not a good situation. Like if you're trying to do that with your client or whatever, like, you know, just trying to like hold on, like keep control of everything they do and stuff. And look, if I've had it where I've said to clients, like, go off and do this thing and train with other people, and then they're like, yeah, I think, you know what, I'm going to start training with them because they felt like they needed more of a competitive edge and they wanted to do a group thing. And I was like, yeah, if that's what you feel like you need, then crack on. Like, that's what you got to do. So I think if you, rather than trying to do some like play some weird game of trying to like pull them into your remote coaching client base, whatever, like just try to help them and try to let your clients sort of just like interact and network inadvertently by training with other people and engaging in other people's training, or letting other people come into their training.
Yeah, and I think that's also, you started to touch on this, Luke, too, but that's something that I push a lot of my program design clients to do. It's like, hey, you got to work out with other people. Like it's good for you to have like a focused program and to work on stuff that you need to work on, but it's really easy for you to also just like get in your head and get sort of lost in terms of like having perspective on what's going on. And, you know, if you do wish to compete in the sport of CrossFit, like you have to be used to, you know, like racing other people and getting beat and like seeing what's going on with that. And so there's a lot of value for individual clients in terms of like getting exposed to being around other people rather than just like in the corner of the gym, you know, like following their specific individualized program on their own little special whiteboard. And then, yeah, by extension, you know, by exposing them to training with other people, like other people are going to be exposed to your program. And, you know, this is probably something that we can jump back to in a later episode as we start to talk about more of this stuff. But the reality is, too, is that a lot of other athletes who are working with one-on-one coaches or like following templated programs are like not having a great experience, right? That like the quality of the overall product in the marketplace, I think, is like quite bad. You know, there's a lot of coaches who are offering individualized programs, quote unquote, that are just like sending a templated thing out to people. Right. Like people sort of know it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm paying you $300 a month for like an individualized program, but like clearly this is just copy and pasted from someone else's stuff. You know, that the communication quality from a lot of coaches is extremely bad. They don't respond to messages. They don't make updates to programs based upon equipment availability, right? Like everyone makes mistakes. Sure. Totally. But like there's a lot of like really, really bad quality coaching going on. And so I think that people potentially underestimate how much trust and like follow through matter. And if they see someone who is coaching and like doing a good job and like actually following up with clients or like giving them a truly individualized program or like giving them actual helpful feedback on videos and all that kind of stuff, that's like a huge selling point, because a lot of people who have been around or been competing for a while or followed like different templated programs, which are like insane and undoable, or, you know, spent $300+ a month to work with a prestigious coach and just gotten like, quite frankly, treated like shit, like that those people actually are looking for something that is like, oh, this person just knows what they're doing and will like follow through. Cool. I'm interested. Right.
Yeah. That follow through is, I think I mean, I've had quite like different experiences with like remote coaching or, you know, getting online coaching in some capacity or whatever level, but like, yeah, the it's like 50-50, the amount that people like actually do the thing they're going to say they're going to do compared to those that don't, which is like, and also when people know that they're working with a coach as well, I'm like, you sort of know that I know how this works, so like why do you just like copy and paste?
Yeah, right. It's like I can see what you did there. I see what you're doing. Come on. Not born yesterday. But yeah, I mean that's maybe something for another episode to think about, like, okay, what can I actually offer that is valuable? But, to sort of like circle back and kind of tie all this stuff together, the biggest thing that's probably going to help people trying to go beyond having a handful of clients to like two handfuls of clients is going to be the combination of working with people in person, giving like legitimately helpful feedback to them, showing them your value and showing that you can help and showing that you're reliable. And then by extension, your clients referring you to other people who they know who have similar goals or are potentially frustrated with their current coaching situation. And then beyond that, if you are playing the social media game, that the benefit from that is probably going to come from, again, for coaches who don't have a large following, from having something like a web presence that people who are interested from one of those two areas of like knowing you in person or being referred to you can actually check out what you're doing. Right. That's going to be the benefit is like, oh, I went to this person's page and I see that they have like good information and know what they're doing. And I am going to actually reach out to them rather than trying to just like attract random strangers from the internet through like quirky content. Right. That's like a totally different situation. So hopefully that's like a somewhat helpful way to think about attracting more clients. And, for the people who are like, man, I just don't want to make Instagram reels. Like, I hate this. The reality is like, you don't have to, right? That's like not necessarily going to be the best way to actually get more clients. But there is potentially a place for it. And if you are going to go in that direction, like you sort of need to know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. Great.